This is Ephesus Baptist Church outside of Campbellton in the community of Ephesus. When was this church built, Dad?
It goes back into probably the 1890s.
Moses Christmas, October of 1843, and he died in September of 1907. This is at the Ephesus Cemetery. And Dad, he served in the some sort of, was that Civil War?
Yeah, Civil War, that's right.
And who is this buried next to him?
That's his wife. Her name was Vasti. She was a Davis, Vasti Davis Christmas. You can see it here on the bottom.
And what about him? Now, what was his relation or?
Well, his relation, he was my great grandfather. Some of their children are buried right here and in front of them here. In fact, my grandfather is here, right here. Moses the father, he's the son.
Okay.
This was my grandmother, and she was a Pilcher, a sister to that one that we just saw over in Campbellton, Willie.
Gotcha.
This was my daddy's sister,
Iva.
Dell. Yeah. And she was only a year old when she died.
Gotcha.
And then the other one there, the same way, Clemmy Otis was a sister. They both died young.
And
this was my grandfather's twin brother.
William Green Christmas.
And that Moses was their father.
So here we have Moses Christmas, who's the patriarch, and then we have his son Benjamin, who was Pop Christmas's father, and my dad Ellis Christmas's grandfather. And then you have Janetta Pilcher Christmas, who was his wife, who was my dad's grandmother. And then you have a sister to Pop Christmas, Iva Dell, who died as really an infant, a year old. And then you have Clemmy, who died at 5 years old, and that was a sister to Pop Christmas.
And they would have been Aunt Gussie's sisters too.
Gotcha.
Aunt Gussie was the only girl that lived.
Gotcha.
And Daddy and my Uncle Dolphus.
All right. And then William Green here is a uncle to your father. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And then this would have been his wife,
right,
Delcy. And who was Allie? I missed that.
I think that was a daughter of theirs.
A daughter of theirs. Okay. So I'm going to go back and get the whole shot. And this is the Christmases from my father's grandfather and great-grandfather, and uncles and aunts and grandmothers and great-grandmother here. And this is Vicey Polk Christmas, who was a daughter of Mose Christmas, correct?
Right.
So this is Johnny and Nora
and Iva Dell.
Now, who did all these headstones? Because these look kind of modern and nice.
My daddy's brother, Adolphus Christmas, in his latter years, somewhere along probably around 80, sold timber off his property and placed these little headstones on these graves that you see here.
A lot of them you wouldn't know who they were now, would you?
No. All they had was that little marker.
Wow.
You'd never known that. They lose their identity. In a matter of 75 years, their identity is gone.
Noah Lee Christmas, and he was Moses Christmas's baby boy. You remember him, don't you?
Oh yes, I do.
What type of work did he do?
He was a farmer, lived back over here, and he had a pretty good sized farm he inherited.
Okay.
From him. He later sold out, or some of it, and moved to Cottondale. And he lived in Cottondale for maybe 25 years. He loved singing. And anytime there was a sing any place, whatever it was, even after he got old and couldn't drive, he'd get somebody to drive him to those sings.
He's Daniel
Daniel Christmas, and something significant to me, he and I had the same birthday, March 26th.
Wow.
I'll make reference to that again when we get over in another cemetery. This was his wife, Maggie. I never knew these people, but I knew of them.
How did all these Christmases come into this part of the country?
They migrated down out of South Carolina into Georgia, and then along about, I believe it was somewhere around 1840, the old man Moses Sr. migrated into here, and he brought these children with him, most of them. Some of them were born here.
And it
was just a matter of hunting a place to settle and live, and after the Confederate War, the United States government opened up certain land. If you did certain things to homestead it, it was all pioneer wilderness, so to speak. They were searching for a place to establish themselves. And they had a sawmill. One of our grandmas had a sawmill that sawed some of this timber for this church over here.
Do you remember coming out to this cemetery as a child for any of these burials or anything?
No. The only burial I remember, and we'll touch on it over here, we missed it a while ago, was my grandmother's mother and father. James Pilcher and Frances Christie Pilcher were my grandmother's parents, my daddy's mother's parents. And right behind them is Janetta. There was my grandmother, and that was their daughter.
I see. Okay.
She was a sister to Will Pilcher that we just saw over in Hamilton.
At the First Baptist Church, right. Do you remember any services?
I can remember her dying. 1931, we lived down below Chipley at Orange Hill, and she died, and I remember my daddy and them getting ready and getting transportation to come to her funeral.
James Pilcher was a county commissioner from Jackson County.
Yeah.
Minnie Lee Pilcher, wife of Jesse O. Christmas, and she died in 1932. And this is Jesse O. Christmas, who died in 1929. So what's the story with these Christmases here?
Jesse Christmas, as I recall it, this right here was a son of Moses Christmas. Would have been my daddy's uncle.
This is more of the Christmases. So up through the 30s, this cemetery was being used, or people were being buried here quite a bit. Up through the 60s even.
Little project I undertook this, wanted to clean up this entrance here, and I had to replace the doors. They'd put inside interior doors, and the lamination began to break off, you know, and get damp off. So we did this summer. I don't know about the original, but it was before the vault pulpit. It's a homemade. That old piano is my age, 1925.
When was this church disbanded, or?
Back in the late 70s, I'd say, early 70s.
That looks like Elaine's handiwork.
That's a painting by one of the ladies.